I'm sure this is really big news that probably most people, at least in Alberta for sure, Canadians second at least, also have heard of. But actually, I even seen this trickle down into some American news on one of the channels I like called Liberal Hive Mind. They're pretty funny. If you haven't subscribed or heard of them, you should go check them out. It's pretty sweet. Um, but anyway, so yeah, this is Krista Freeland talking about what she's calling preloaded stimulus plan, meaning the savings that Canadians who've been able to accumulate money during the shutdown should consider their money preloaded stimulus. It's already ready to go. It doesn't have to be borrowed. You've already earned it. Please spend it, spend it, spend it. Which sounds kind of scary if you know what's really going on. If the objective is to break us and you ruin someone's savings and then find a way to ruin them next, they don't have any of that money to make it through maybe another year. The spending this year was 27 billion. It was more than that. Anyway, it was on certain things, 27 billion. And next year they want to spend 30 plus whatever on everything else. Like, this is nowhere near over yet. Just because there's news of a vaccine doesn't mean it's here. Doesn't mean they're not going to do some kind of stimulus left, right, and center, up and down, all around. But at any rate, right now she's talking about your money. If you've been able to save money and keep it in a savings account, how are we going to loosen it up and unlock it? So let's listen to this for a bit. I've got some commentary through this, and then a couple more things to talk about. One of the key things that we're going to go into is something called a bail-in, if you've never heard of that before. I've got a definition pulled up so that we can go over that and get a really clear idea of what a bail-in is if you've never heard of it. So at any rate, let's get through the cringe and then we'll get to that.
Our Finance Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, and thank you very much for being with us, Minister. And I want to start right there with this notion of the spending, because you allude to it in your fiscal update. The language seems to me to be important. Smart, targeted. These are words that suggest you want to make very careful, kind of incisive spending on the government's part to get the economy going. What might that look like? Can you give us any detail?
Well, it's great to be with you, Amanda. And I want to thank you, first of all, for really zeroing in on the preloaded stimulus idea. None of us have a crystal ball, but economists like Ben, like Doug, have been pointing out that some Canadian households, and it tends to be the better off households, do have quite a lot of money that they've saved because there hasn't been that much to do in the pandemic. And certainly it would be great if that money could go towards driving our recovery. And I want to make an offer now to all of your listeners. If people have ideas on how the government can act to help unlock that preloaded stimulus, I am very, very interested. Maybe
She literally says, if any of your listeners have any ideas for the government to unlock that preloaded stimulus, which she literally just said is people's savings, then I'd like to hear it. And if you don't give any suggestions, or even if you do, I'm sure they'll just do whatever they want with it anyway, which is where the bail-in comes in. Now I'm going to stop her here for a moment and we'll come back to her because she says some more interesting things. But this statement is challenged by Pierre Poilievre. And you should hear her response to it. So this is quick, but this is related, so we'll just skip off over here for a quick second.
Mr. Speaker, the finance minister is a big idea, and it involves your bank account. She's very worried that Canadians are saving too much, even though those same savings are lent out to and invested in other job-creating businesses. So now she's looking for ideas on how the government can act to unlock those savings of Canadians. Does the government really believe that holding Canadians upside down by the ankles and shaking their change loose is a stimulus plan?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Yet again, the Conservatives are misconstruing my words. It almost makes me wonder if they're doing it on purpose. The fact is, there is nothing dystopian or even very complicated about the idea of a preloaded stimulus. We all know that local small businesses are the heart of our economy. We all also know that because of physical distancing, we are unable to patronize them now. That is why, as soon as it is safe for our economy to fully reopen, our government is looking for ways to encourage Canadians to support our local small business.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
Why would it require the government's involvement to figure out how to unlock your savings to stimulate small businesses? Well, the first thing that would have to happen is that money would have to be taken back by the bank. So the bank gets its hands on that money first through the bail-in, and then perhaps it is redistributed to some small businesses, perhaps. And that's something that's in the works too coming up, is that they've extended and elongated small business recovery that you can apply for from, I believe it was $3,000 or $4,000, $5,000, up to $20,000 now, I think, is what the numbers are. We'll get into that too, because Kenny talks about it. I've got a clip of that, and Freeland talks about it a little bit too, so we'll let her rattle on through that as well. Go back there.
Maybe, as Doug Porter was suggesting, it happens by itself. That's the best case scenario for me. But if people have ideas on how we can really, try to unleash that, and particularly unleash it in the parts of the Canadian economy that really need support, tourism, hospitality, domestic services, let me know.
So, again, he interjects on her line, then she comes right out and says, yeah, we're going to take your money and do something with it, so tell us where you want it, as if that matters. Yeah. The thing about this is it going to hurt these people so bad when they take their money that it won't actually stimulate anything, because no one will have money to spend anything on anything now, because you've just stimulated businesses from people who now have less money, and other people don't have money to spend money at these businesses that are left. And it's just going to further drive our middle class into the ground. This is part of the Great Reset. This is about making everybody go broke over this, and taking as big of a piece of the pie as humanly possible. This shouldn't say humanly possible, because the people who do this I don't think are human. But yeah, anyway, so moving along. We'll listen to some more.
And you may well hear from people, Minister. Just in terms of the update, it's a pretty clear snapshot of where things are. We know the spending has been high. The deficit is enormous, and it will continue to be enormous for many, many years, even as it comes down. How can you reassure Canadians that we will get this under control, that we're not entering a new era where we're creating systemic holes, budgetary problems that will last? In other words, where temporary spending becomes permanent?
Well, by doing exactly what you just said, Amanda. We were very clear in the fall economic statement, and I am going to be very clear in my stewardship of the economy, that there is a big difference between the temporary one-off spending we need to get through the coronavirus and to get through and, to minimize the scarring that we experience as we fight COVID, and then the temporary spending we need to do to get out of the coronavirus recession. That is in one category, and that is entirely different from permanent built-in structural spending. We are going to be very disciplined about that, and we need to be disciplined about that.
We do have, obviously, enormous need right now. You just increase the business loans, sort of reintroduce them for those that need it. How much have you factored in how bad this winter could be? In other words, the spending you've announced, I know you've set up to $27 billion this year to about $30 billion next year. Will that be enough, Minister, to get us through to a vaccine?
I don't have a crystal ball. None of us do. And I think the one thing that has been consistent about economists' forecasts about the economic impact of coronavirus is they've been consistently wrong. I think people underestimated the initial impact of the coronavirus on the economy. Then they underestimated how strong the recovery would be in the summer. And I think people have underestimated what the impact of the second wave of the virus would be. So I think we all need to be very humble and be very aware of the fact that there is huge uncertainty out there. Having said that, what we have tried to do is create a safety net that will be in place until next summer for Canadian businesses, for Canadian households. And at this point, it is a pretty robust safety net. If you take the wage subsidy, which we've increased now to a maximum of 75%, the rent subsidy, which is 65%, but has an additional 25% lockdown top-up, and rent subsidy businesses are getting, the first businesses who apply are getting their money this week. You mentioned the CEBA, Amanda, and thank you for underscoring that. People, call up your banks now. The CEBA top-up is available. That's $20,000, $10,000 forgivable. So that is a pretty, I think, robust safety net for businesses. But I'll never say never. And if we do spot holes in the programs, we'll do what we can to fix them. The other thing, which is so crucial, is we have light at the end of the tunnel. We know that vaccines are coming. And what we're trying to do is now create a bridge for Canadian businesses to that end point, which is now in sight.
So basically, if it's not enough money, we'll just keep borrowing it, and the vaccine is coming, so that should fix everything. But, well, we'll see how that goes, considering the vaccine is still, at least the Pfizer one, and I would suggest all of them, are in their phase 3 development, which is long-term testing. So everyone who gets it is still going to be technically a guinea pig. You've made it through the short term, you've seen what that happens during that, long term still to be determined. On an experimental vaccine, no less. This type of vaccine has never been made before. Yeah, it'll be interesting, I'm sure.
I have two questions and not a ton of time. One is, you must be thinking about increasing revenue, tax increases. Is the GST in your sights? What will you do to raise the money we need to right the balance here?
I announced some new tax measures on Monday. The tax on internet services to level the playing field for Canadian and international providers of those. We also announced something that we campaigned on, which is a limit to the stock options deduction. And we made a very clear commitment that we are going to act if at the multilateral level at the OECD we don't reach a consensus. Canada will act unilaterally by January of 2022 on taxing the large multinational companies that do a lot of business here in Canada. And we announced that we're going to work on a tax for non-resident owners of vacant properties. So there are some tax measures there.
So there you go. We'll all get our nuts taxed off, and big businesses will get taxed, and maybe they won't stick around as a potentiality. We did see that happen with a lot of the oil. Of course, there was a lot of other things more than that against it. At any rate, now let's go to what a bail-in is. What is a bail-in? A bail-in provides relief to a financial institution on the brink of failure by requiring the cancellation of debts owed to creditors and depositors. A bail-in is the opposite of a bailout, which involves the rescue of a financial institution by external parties, typically governments using taxpayers' money for funding. Let's unlock some of that taxpayer money for funding by bailing in. Bailouts help prevent creditors from taking on losses, while bail-ins mandate creditors to take losses. Key takeaways, whatever. A bail-in helps a financial institution on the brink of failure by requiring the cancellation of debts owed to creditors and depositors. Bail-ins and bailouts are both resolution schemes used in distressed situations. Bailouts help to keep creditors from losses, while bail-ins mandate that creditors take losses. Bail-ins have been considered across the globe to help mitigate the burden on taxpayers as a result of bank bailouts. Of course, we're going to get taxed all the hell anyway, so it won't make any difference. And so, yeah, that's what I think could be maybe going on, is the bail-in is being structured. If you don't get that money into... I would buy precious metals with it if I had that extra savings sitting around. Then I would take possession of them. I wouldn't put them in a safety deposit box in a bank or anywhere else. I would take it physically and hide it somewhere myself so I knew where it was and it couldn't be touched by anybody. until I said so. That's the safest way to hedge yourself against what's coming, so they're not going to steal your money. Most people aren't going to have that issue. Most of us aren't probably in the range of where they would steal your money. I have a checking account. I don't know if they would take anything out of that or not, if they would only go after, quote, savings accounts, to use the terminology exactly. So at any rate, now we'll go listen to Mr. Kenney. If you want to bugger off, I mean, I know people don't like super shalong videos, but this is kind of what I look at as happening. This will be Canadian, but it'll also be obviously provincial too. Kenney talks a little bit about that, but if you're not an Albertan and you don't care, whatever else, then that's fine. Bugger off. Thanks for listening. Catch you on the next vid. But for those of us who are interested, we'll listen to Kenney talk a little bit here, and I've got him sped up a little bit so he'll talk faster so we don't have to listen as long.
We have arrived at not as a first resort, but as a last resort to protect lives and to preserve our healthcare system. Having said that, we recognize that the very real impact this will have on so many employers, on jobs, on small and medium-sized businesses in particular. And so our cabinet has also decided massively to expand urgent financial support, particularly for small and medium-sized enterprises. We are tripling immediately the Small and Medium Enterprise Relaunch Grant from $5,000, actually we're quadrupling it to $20,000, while at the same time lowering the eligibility threshold to qualify for the grant from 40% of revenues lost to 30%. We're also making this retroactive to March, and this brings the Alberta government's total COVID direct relief for Alberta businesses to over $1 billion, in addition to significant federal support for businesses that have been forced to suspend their operations. Minister Schweitzer will go into further details.
So there we go. We're going to get Alberta stimulus dating all the way back to the beginning of this in March, up to whatever, $20,000. That'll probably have the $10,000 maybe forgivable on it too that Freeland was talking about, although I believe Freeland's loan she's talking about, the CEBA, is not the same as this one. So those are two different lines of credit you can take to try to save your business if you qualify. So that's a ton more borrowing. Like I say, this is really all just more designed to just sink us right into the hole. One of the only things that'll actually help, and I hate to say this, is going to be all the extra people that they're going to be bringing in over the next 3 years. That does help spread the debt out, and so that'll kind of keep things looking decent enough for everybody, I guess. But in the long run, it's not going to help anything. This is just a never-ending bubble that ultimately just has these cycles running through it, bigger and smaller cycles. So whatever. But anyway, we will listen to... Actually, we don't even need to. There's another guy who comes in and starts talking, and he basically says all the same stuff, and he's just a knob to listen to, so I'm not going to make you watch that. So anyway, thanks for watching this one. I hope that's been informative for you if you haven't seen this already. And yeah, I'm going to pull off another one right away here too on some oldie but a goodie once again. Some things get forgotten in the past not too long ago. They need to be brought up again. All right, peace out.